Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jay, and I'm a terminally online historian and basically news junkie, especially foreign policy news. And so I got a few stories I want to cover this week and give you my opinion of. And we're going to start with the big one, which just occurred this past Friday, and that is the summit in Alaska between U.S. President Donald J. Trump and Russian President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And holy moly, was it bad. Now, it seemed like it started well with Trump rolling out the red carpet for Putin, letting Putin ride in the beast with him, and even a military flyover with featuring F-35s and a B-2. But it ended up ending early and not in a good way. Basically, Trump caved to all Putin's requests. The big one is Russia keeping the entirety of the Donbass, even territory that's still held and just been retaken by Ukraine. And just so you know, with this map, if you see kind of in the southeastern corner, the Donetsk province and area just north of it, that's the Donbass. The biggest cities and most important cities are Donetsk city itself, as well as the port of Mariupol. And this is also the eastern industrial heart of Ukraine. So if Trump does agree and forces Zelensky to concede all of this to Putin, well, that just economically and industrially cripples Ukraine, and they may not be able to recover. Furthermore, the Donbass also has the majority of the coal deposits that the Ukraine has, and that would, in a cold Russian winter, is a cheap source of power, especially since more oil refineries keep getting attacked, but more on that in a moment. Another thing that Putin wanted and Trump caved to is that Ukraine would be prevented from being allowed to join NATO and the EU. There's also not a ceasefire yet, so the war is still going. And Putin, being Putin, is making Trump speak with EU and Ukraine, and there's currently a meeting scheduled for that tomorrow. This is being recorded on August 17, 2025. Zelensky, thankfully, is still defiant. Yesterday, there was yet another Ukrainian drone strike on an oil refinery, so Zelensky is definitely going to hit Putin where it hurts, and that's going to be all the Gazprom oil refineries. Because you go after the oil, you slow down the war machine, then you create a backlog of crew, which you got to offload cheap to places that still have intact refineries, specifically India and China. Now, what is very interesting, the scene before and after images of Trump. First, this is Trump greeting Putin on the red carpet at the Air Force Base there in Anchorage. And you can see Trump and Putin are very happy and wanting to work together. But by the time they got to the so-called press conference, Trump looks like he's been run through the ringer. He looks tired, exhausted, looks like he's mentally drained. And this is interesting because it shows that Putin is a master of manipulating folks. And this comes from his time as a KGB officer during the old Soviet Union. And in comparison, the last time Putin and Trump met back in Helsinki, this is what Trump looked like in the press conference after the meeting as well. And according to Michael Wolff, who was the author who was there at Helsinki and speaking with Steve Bannon, Bannon said that Trump looked like a beaten dog. And that kind of shows here. Now, that doesn't mean that Trump thought things were bad. Actually, Trump was on Hannity that evening, and he said he thought he did well. Thought that he came to a good rapport. And through that Hannity interview, we know that Putin took all of the claims Trump has said, like, greatest economy ever, 2020 election was stolen, don't trust mail-in ballots, basically regurgitated all of that back to Trump to get his way, just like someone who would have manipulated field intelligence operatives and spies back in the old Cold War days. Now, again, back to author Michael Wolff. Yesterday he was on the Daily Beast podcast, which is one where he mentioned that Trump looked like a beaten dog after the Helsinki meeting, but he also got a text from a White House insider of his, which just said, all it said was effed. So the White House knows it's bad. Very, very bad. So, with that, it's bad. And make bad things worse is the planning dice got leaked. And then we're going to have one hell of a lunch, actually, with a filet mignon and halibut Olympia, but that never happened, so I feel bad for the chefs there at that facility in Alaska. Putting all that work in order to just put it in to-go boxes, take it home to their families. So what's going to happen next? Well, Zelensky is going to keep fighting, and did so yesterday by attacking an oil refinery, which I do think may be the beginning of a larger drone and missile offensive. The EU has come out and condemned the meeting and stated that they will increase their aid. As of this morning, the Italians have joined the coalition with the Germans, the British, and the French to assist Ukraine. As for Trump's immediate concerns, the U.S. is going to distract his base, the MAGA base, from the Epstein files for a couple of days. But Trump's performance in this meeting could be signaling to the cabinet that they need to start thinking about whether or not they need to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove Trump from power. Not knowing that he performed badly, but Trump, if you go search for it, when he was walking down the red carpet to meet Putin, he could not walk in a straight line. I would definitely recommend looking up Midas Touch's speed up version so you can see how bad it is, because in slow motion it doesn't look as bad, but you speed it up, you can tell he can't walk in a straight line. So that could be a sign of cognitive decline. Even though I did take a lot of psychology as undergrad, I am no expert in no mental health professional, so take that with as much salt as you think necessary. At this point, I don't see that Congress is going to get involved, especially as MAGA-pilled as it is, although Senators Lawler and Graham have come out and condemned the meeting and are seeking back-channel ways of helping out the folks in Ukraine. Domestically, and more concerning, is Trump has continued to try and find a bigger, distraction, and that is with his takeover of Washington, D.C. Now, the good news is, even though the troops have been in D.C. assisting, in quotation marks, the D.C. police, the DOJ did try to take over the Metropolitan Police there and have the DEA administrator run it, but thankfully Pam Bondi was told she couldn't do that by the courts, and the current Metropolitan Police chief is still there. And just to let you know, this is the same police chief that responded to the January 6 attacks. Now, Trump and DOJ, they had invoked Section 720 of U.S. Code to try and take over D.C., and another reason why they picked D.C. is D.C. is not a state yet. It's actually a federal district. But there's some issues with Trump trying to do that. Specifically, there's the Home Rule Act from 1972, which granted D.C. its own local government. And also, Article 1 of the Constitution actually gives the Congress, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, the federal oversight of D.C. The executive is not involved at all. Again, like I said, the legality of all this is still being challenged in court. the police chief is still in their job. Thankfully, and you've probably seen videos of this on your Twitter or Insta or TikTok feeds. Thank God for First Amendment, because the folks in D.C. are protesting. There has been a viral video going around that from Audi Field on Friday, where the NWSL team, Washington Spirit, in their match against Louisville, there were folks pretty much got the whole crowd chanting "Free DC" in the middle of that match. And I know this local news out of Chattanooga was the first thing I found, of course, on protests and marches in D.C., but there were protests and marches in D.C. yesterday. And something else I found curious is teenagers in D.C. have actually told NPR that they don't feel as safe as they did before the feds took over. And that's something interesting, because that could bode ill for GOP and future authoritarians. It's not good for them. They should learn to trust the federal government and trust that they have your back. But if you put people in authority that won't do that, you're going to drive them to the more Democratic Party. So this may be just a long burn with these teams, but that it does not bode well for any GOP prospects of winning seats or support from folks in D.C. Now, another thing that is concerning is how MAGA just attracts all these Nazi lovers. Case in point this week is Trump's nominee for the Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner, who he fired the previous one because he didn't like the fact that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BSL, who does the job reports, goes back and edits their findings as they get more data. He thinks they're just rigging them to fuck him over. So this is E.G. Antoni. He's from Heritage Foundation. He's got a PhD in economics, but apparently, according to other economists with PhDs in that teacher, they say dissertation barely got him through. And apparently he loves the Nazi battleship Bismarck. Now, as a naval historian myself, and if you can see in my background, I do have models of ships and paintings of ships, and I've got a whole bookcases full of material on naval war and maritime warfare and history. Bismarck was combat active for less than a week. She only was able to destroy one ship, and that was infamously the HMS Hood, which blew up after one shell shot. And then if you pay attention to my history playlist, I will actually be explaining some of the issues with the battle cruisers in the next few weeks, which would also explain why Hood blew up. And then after Hood was destroyed, pretty much the rest of the British Navy, as they were only fighting the Germans at that time, pretty much just abandoned the convoys to the wolf packs and just went after Bismarck and sunk her. And the British say they sunk her, the Germans say they scuttled. The evidence is pointing more towards scuttling because the Bismarck was incapacitated. Regardless, Bismarck was used by Hitler as a propaganda tool, and Hitler even attended the launching of Bismarck. So it's problematic having the Bismarck as your background when doing live streams and any kind of commentary from home. If you were going to pick a battleship, I would have picked something like an American Iowa class vessel, like Missouri or New Jersey, the two most famous from that class. I recently went to Battleship Alabama. That's a nice vessel as well. Battleship North Carolina. If you want to pick something older, you could always go to Pennsylvania class, of which USS Arizona was part of. Those were very nice looking vessels. There's also Battleship Texas, which is still down in San Jacinto, Texas, for you to visit. If you wanted to do something that was not American, I would recommend, say, HMS War Sprite, HMS Dreadnought, any even Battleship Yamato from the Japanese, Imperial Japanese navies. Those would have been much better backgrounds and also better looking vessels, and with, for the most part, better track records. Not only, though, is E.J. Antoni showing his fascist tendencies with his love of the Bismarck. Yeah, he was at January 6th. ABC went through all that footage, and they found him within a few meters of some of the walls of the Capitol building. So yeah, he was there. He may not have infiltrated the facility itself, but he was definitely on the grounds and was definitely not a so-called bystander. And now for more concerning news for the civil rights of the LGBTQ plus community, of which I am part of. Our old nemesis, Kim Davis of Kentucky, is seeking certiorari with the Supreme Court in her lawsuit, where she's trying to get her conviction for not doing her job and the fines involved overturned. So basically what it was, after Obergefell was ruling came down and legalized gay marriage, Kim Davis, working as a county clerk in one of the many counties in Kentucky, just did not do her job and said that her Christian faith prevented her to sign those marriage certificates, as it was unbiblical, which was a violation of Kentucky law, as the law requires county clerks to sign off on those documents. So she's suing, and she's trying to get the conviction overturned, get out of paying the fines, and as a long shot is trying to get Obergefell overturned. Now, do I think this is going to be granted, sir? Actually, I think it's doubtful. While I know that Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito like to take another crack at it because of the recent backlash of the Dobbs ruling a couple of years ago. The other conservatives, Roberts, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, I don't think they want to touch this with a 40-foot pole. I think they want to leave it alone, not deal with the backlash, and just deny it and wash their hands of it. But that's something to keep an eye on, especially, like I said, for those of us in the LGBTQ plus community, as that can really mess up families should Obergefell get overturned. Now, with all that being said, I hope you like this analysis. I'll be back next Sunday with more of it. I'll also upload stuff on history on Saturdays. Right now, I just started a series on the Anglo-German naval arms race, and I'll also factor the Americans in as well. So please like, subscribe, and share this with anyone you think is interested. And if you're going to make a comment, please be kind to everybody. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.